All right, so this is going to be Young Professional Nomad Overview. This is the website address, and I wrote like a 4,000 word blog post, basically going over this entire class in written form. So if you want to go there, if you missed something, you can either go through the video or you can just kind of read through this. So it's all on there. So we're going to start off tonight. Introductions. Who are you and when are you planning to implement Nomad is kind of the question. So Allison, you get to start.
My name is Allison, and I am planning to implement Nomad hopefully within the next decade.
Nice.
Ideally.
Ideally, next decade, 10 years. It seems like plenty of time to kind of figure it out. So, what about you, Cameron?
My name is Cameron Belknap. I plan on implementing, I'm a student right now currently, using this kind of period as a learning process.
Sure.
I could get one right now probably, but I don't think it'd be very smart, especially not knowing where I'm going to end up.
Totally.
So I'm really trying to learn everything I can so I can really pull the trigger.
Yep.
Within a couple months, I hope, of graduating.
What year are you now?
So I'm a senior right now. I did a co-op, so I took a semester off
Okay.
to work, and I also am a business minor.
Okay.
So I have one more year left. So I have a couple.
So you're like a senior, but you have like a 5-year plan or something.
Yes, I'm a 5-year plan for engineering.
Okay.
Yeah, so been saving up money. I have a decent amount in kind of ETFs and mutual funds right now, so I'll probably sell most of that, hopefully, in an opportune time.
Yeah.
Market's not looking too good either.
Yeah.
Recently, so.
No, the class next week is going to be pretty interesting because it's going to be how to do the whole model for $3 grand.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a good one for you because you don't need a ton of money to do it. I mean, if you put more down, it helps, and I'll show you some stuff tonight on that. But yeah.
Yeah. So implement Nomad hopefully within a few months of graduating, get my first, and also get another property as well. With Nomad seems pretty cheap, so.
Yeah.
I'm not really an expensive person, so I'll have a decent amount of cash flow with engineering.
We're going to show basically some numbers here tonight about salaries and also if you happen to be on the lower end of the salary range, how to actually do it faster. Yeah. So I'll show some strategies tonight when we go over that. So,
yeah, awesome.
All right, cool. Let me know if you have any questions. Anyone comes in late, we'll kind of skip their intros. Upcoming classes. So next week is that how to acquire a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio with just $3,000. I'm probably writing a whole book on that. I'll be making all the slides for next week, this week, and then once I get all the slides done, I probably will end up writing a book. And so I would probably think the book would be done by the end of the year, if I had to guess. Just kind of pound it out. So it's going to be a pretty interesting model for that next week. The week after that, there's no class. I'm out of town. And then the week after that, basically November 3rd, is going to be analyzing a deal Brian spreadsheet. You can go download a copy of the spreadsheet if you go to learntoberich.com/spreadsheet and download a copy of the spreadsheet and bring your computer with you to this class if you have a laptop, because we're going to actually walk through analyzing a deal together. And then the week after that, same thing, except we're going to do a deal where we're doing a sale on a lease option. So we'll do a lease option exit on that particular class. So these 2 weeks, you'll probably want to bring your laptop and just make sure you have that spreadsheet loaded on there. And if you want to see the full schedule, I just put up the whole schedule for the entire 2017 year.
Okay.
So I listed out all the classes. There's probably, 50 or so, 45 or so different classes listed up there. There's some holidays and stuff. But otherwise, there's a whole schedule up there. And you can go look at those with the descriptions of what's going to be taught in those too. And the thought process is we recorded a bunch this year. So I think we started doing Thursday nights in April or May or June or something like that. And we've got a bunch of recordings, but we'll do a full year's worth of classes for next year. So that's going to be up there too. Have you watching the videos after the fact?
I watched a couple, more the Wednesday night ones, just because I have labs I would like to attend, but I like attending things in person.
Yeah.
I have time, so.
That makes sense. You've been accessing the Wednesday night ones?
I think so, yeah. I think it was, which one was, it was the deal one?
Oh, like how to do off-market analysis?
No, it was like one of the first days.
Okay.
Which one? It was one of the Wednesday night ones. It was more not Nomad. It was more of the real estate in general.
Okay.
I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was something.
And you found it on YouTube or you found it on James Orr? Where'd you find it?
It was on the one website I wrote down.
Okay.
Because to be rich blog bit.
Oh yeah, so that one actually is probably the Thursday night classes. Almost all the Thursday ones are on there. The Wednesday night ones are usually locked down.
It was the Thursday night fun.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of ones on like just how to buy houses and stuff like that because it's part of the Nomad process.
Yeah, that's also very important. I don't really know anything about it.
Yeah, there's some classes up there of the previous recordings that you can go access on those too. So if you need questions, just drop me an email. All right, so what is Nomad? Nomad, you basically buy a home as an owner-occupant. You live there for a year, buy a new home, and convert the previous one to a rental, and then you repeat the process until you have as many rental properties as you want. We model it with basically 10, but it could be 1, it could be 2, it could be 5, it could be 20. It really is whatever you want to do and whatever your financial goals are. So that's basically it. You have any questions on Nomad? You've kind of been to classes before, so you got to understand it. All right, good. All right, so young professional nomad. So young professional nomad is primarily someone who's recently introduced to the workplace. It can be a college graduate, although one of my sons is in college. He's a junior in college. The other son is a just recently graduated senior from high school, so out of high school. And I'm not sure my other son's going to go to college. And so I consider him a young professional nomad, although he's not going to college. So really, he needs to just establish himself with job history for a year in order to be able to qualify for the loan, and then he can do that. Coming out of college, it's a little easier, because they consider your college to kind of be some work history. Okay. Often just graduate from college, although not required. And then moderate earnings. I'm going to show you some slides about average income and some additional data about that, because we're going to talk about young professional nomads tonight. All right, so here's some average pay. This is from time.com/money, their web address up there. And this is the different degrees that they've broken out, and then the 2016 average salary coming out of college for those. So a couple things I want to point out there. Number one is engineering's at the top of the list, so that's great for you. Basically, what are you doing there, Allison? Yeah, so 46,585 is what the average is for that. So it's still not bad though, especially since we're modeling the whole Nomad model on $3,721 per month, which is probably about 40-something thousand, 45,000. So it's pretty close to what we're doing for the average there anyway. But you'll see that the lowest one is education at about 34, and you'll be able to have that. But basically, you see the kind of spectrum there. I'm going to show you another slide here in a second where we break it out even more. And we're going to model less expensive houses because these are averages. And so there are a lot of people that make a lot more than this, and there are a lot of people that make a lot less than this. And so we're kind of averaging this middle number here to do that. One other thing I'll point out is we're saying $3,721 per month. However, it assumes no other debt. So if you have student loans, if you have car payments, if you have put stuff in your credit card or anything like that, it's going to mean you need to earn more than this in order to be able to buy the houses and do the Nomad model. And so you got to be careful about that. So two things you can do if you do have student loans. Number one is make more money. That's one thing you can do in order to do the Nomad model, or buy less expensive housing, and we're going to model what that looks like. So what does this look like? Instead of actually doing just a breakdown of basically degree, this is from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and it shows you starting salary. This is 2015 data, but what's great about this is it shows us the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile. So basically, it shows you the median broken out for a bunch of different careers. Engineering is another example on here. So the median for engineering was 62, average was 61. I'm assuming as an engineer, you know the difference between average and median? Okay, good. And then basically 25th percentile, 55, or 67. So one of the things I wanted to point out is some of these lower numbers down here, English and psychology, visual and performing arts, they're like in the 24 to 27K per year range for the 25th percentile. And what that means is that 1/4 of the people that are graduating earn less than that, and 3/4 earn more than that. Okay? So when we kind of look at some of these less expensive plans, we're going to kind of focus on this later. And that's going to come back later. I'm going to start off with the normal example that we've been doing in all the classes, and then I'll kind of lower the numbers and show you what that looks like. Everyone follow? All right. Here's another chart about income. So this is a pretty interesting one. This is actually from the Huffington Post, and they're citing a survey by Accenture 2015 College Graduate Employment Survey. Only 15% of this year's 2015 grads expected to earn $25,000 a year or less in their first job. While that is the amount that almost 3 times as many recent 2013, 2014 grads earn. So basically, they polled them and said, hey, do you expect to earn less than $25,000? And only 15% said, 6 and 9, only said, yeah, I expect to earn less than $25K. What actually happened, though, is 26 plus 15, 41% of them ended up earning less than $25K. So the expectation of going to college and what you actually do may not be the same. And that's one of the things I want to point out in this chart. And then we can see the percentage of people that are under 30 or so.
So is that assuming placement into their desired field?
Yeah, it could be because they have stuff in here about unemployed, no salary, and then unpaid internship or volunteer work. So,
Yeah, it's super low.
right? And it's all things combined. It's not just a specific degree program. So we're going to kind of talk about these numbers as we go through because it's important if you're coming out of college, can I do this nomad model? Is it realistic for me to kind of come out here and buy properties and be able to do it? We're going to look. And I think it is. All right, so here are the same assumptions. You can go to this URL in here and actually have this show up on the calculator so you can do your own calculations. We've gone over this kind of assumptions before. Has everyone seen these assumptions? Have you seen these before? Okay, so all the assumptions everyone's seen, so I can kind of skip them. If you need to go watch them, there's a whole bunch of videos that go through these, but these are the same ones we've been doing the whole time, okay? So these are the same charts we've been doing before. This is the estimated growth monthly income for a household in order to be able to do the Nomad model on that price, $286,000 property. So $3,721 per month, assuming you have no other debt. Here's an interesting rule though. For every $100 in additional debt you have, so if you have a car loan for $200 a month, you need to earn $222.22 more per month to qualify. So if you have a $200 a month car payment, you need to earn $444 per month more to be able to support this same purchase price. Does that make sense? So you'd have to add like $450 or so to this in order to have it work. So that's why it's really important to watch your debt levels when you're trying to do this Nomad thing. One other thing I want to point out, can you see that over time, we're having to increase how much we earn in order to buy more properties? Does that make sense? So in the second year, you need to earn $44.41 instead of $37.21 per month. Does anyone know why?
You're buying more houses.
You're buying more houses, but it's...
You have more cash flow too. Just loans qualify more from our loans over.
So there's really two factors. Number one is the price of the house that we're buying. And in this particular case, the price of the house is not the biggest factor. What the real big factor is, we have negative cash flow in the assumption that I've made here. So we're assuming that when you buy these houses, you're slightly upside down when you don't take into account depreciation, because you can't take into account depreciation when you're actually doing the loan qualification. Okay? And so because there's negative cash flow, we need to be able to support that negative cash flow over time.
But there'll only be negative cash flow on a couple houses at a time max, right?
Right, but we're always having negative cash flow because each time you buy a new one, you start over at the beginning of that negative cash flow. And so eventually, you'll notice it tapers off, right? The curve is getting less because we're seeing cash flow from the other ones and it's making up for it, but it's not quite enough to make it completely positive. And if they were even, then it would basically mean that the cash flow is break even. Okay? We're going to see what happens when we kind of do lower priced properties, because what happens with lower priced properties, we actually have positive cash flow. And I'll show you that because it actually impacts how much you need to earn.
So if you can afford it, I'm not sure. I think you mentioned that the 5% loan is at the FHA.
No, the 5% is a conventional loan. 3.5% is FHA.
Okay, so the 5%. Is there a max property that so can you only buy a $600,000 property with that, or is there a limit to that?
There is. There's a practical limit. It's based on like local geography, I'm pretty sure. We don't usually approach it, so it doesn't come up very often for me. But there are limits. And if you go over a certain amount, it becomes a jumbo loan.
Okay, so if you can afford, should you try to maximize your house price?
That's a great question.
Have one of that 5% at a time?
And I haven't worked the math on it. It's a really good question as to whether or not you should maximize it. Part of me says if you maximize it, you end up having a larger amount of money at the end because you're paid off 10 houses that were worth more. But you tend to lose cash flow when you get to more expensive houses. The ratio of rent to price tends not to be as good, and so it's bad that way. My gut is the lower price the houses, the better you're going to be. And there's another slide in here where we talk about being in the meat of the market. And I'm not sure if actually it's in this or it's just on the blog, but it basically talks about being in the meat of the market. And the meat of the market for me is just below median price of house, but above the bottom. You don't want to be in the cheapest stuff possible because that's where the riffraff is. That's where people that they barely can come up with security deposit and the first month's rent are, and if they lose their job, it's really hard for you to get paid, and so you have a lot of vacancy and collection issues. You want to be above that kind of very, very bottom threshold. You want to be in like the second quartile, so basically above the 25%, but below median is kind of that sweet spot where rent and price are sort of optimized, but you're not dealing with, a lot of the challenge of, dealing with like really rough neighborhoods and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we covered this, the $100 rule of thumb, so it's important to realize that you have debt load and that affects things. This is the same chart except it's showing yearly numbers now. So 44,000 and change the first year, 53 and change the second year. Student loans will impact your ability to borrow. If you go to College Nomad Overview, that's the class we did in College Nomad. Anyone go watch that video? Did you watch that one? Okay, so that's a good video. It kind of goes over paying for college using the Nomad model. So if you want to watch that, it has a whole class on that. All right, so here's the value of the house. We basically talked off, we're starting off at 286,000. In year 2, that same house is worth 294,580. And so we're trying to buy essentially very similar houses each year. We're not trying to buy a little bit better house each year. It's the same type of house, bread and butter houses in normal neighborhoods. And so you're buying in year 2 a 294,000 and change house. In year 3, 303, and so on. Until in year 10, you're buying a $373,165 house, which is a 3% per year appreciation. Okay, you guys come to the appreciation class or at least watch that one online?
Yeah, I think I was there.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff in there if you haven't seen it. So definitely go watch that. No questions on this, all simple, right? Everyone seen this before? Awesome. All right, so appreciation on one home. This is the dollar amount that the house is going up each year. So you go out of college, you buy a house for the first time. In the first year, while you're living there, the property goes up 3%. It went up $8,580. What's interesting about that to me is if you made $44,655, the average income or the income you need in order to do this plan, and your property value went up $8,580, you made 19.21% of your salary in appreciation. So you almost made 20% of the amount of money you're making as a salary just by having a house for the first year. So even if you decide not to do Nomad and do all 10 deals, buying one property has a pretty significant impact on net worth. Even if you didn't save any money, you decide, okay, I'm going to go buy a house. Property value is going up at 3% a year, contributes to your overall net worth by about 20% of your income. It's a weird, twisted way of looking at it, but you almost save 20% of your income just by buying a house. Does that make sense? Okay. So each year it goes up more, and in year 2, it went up $8,837, but now you own 2 of them. So it's 8,837 times 2. So now in year 2, you made almost 40% of your income. In year 3, you have 3 houses going up 9K. So 9 times 3 is 27. That's pretty significant. You're really starting to do it. By the time you're at year 5, you've got 5 houses and you're doing almost 10K a year. You're probably exceeding your income just from appreciation. And that's a pretty powerful place to be. So I just wanted to point that out to people. Any questions on that slide? All right, cool. So besides the houses going up in value, you're paying down the loan each year. And so in the first year, you paid down $4,383 on that loan. This is assuming you put 5% down in order to buy the property. So when you put 5% down, $4,383 is paid off in the first year on the property. So you continue to grow, and each year, the amount you're paying off on the loan is increasing by a little bit. Everyone know why?
Amortizing loan. Or
Yes.
however you pronounce that.
It's an amortizing loan. You threw me off by doing an extra thing in there.
Yeah, you always do
So
that,
So basically, the loan amount that you owe is going down a little bit, and so the amount you're paying in interest is going down, and so you end up paying off a little bit more each month on that loan. So each year, you're paying off more on this. So by the time you get to year 4, you're paying off about $5,000 a year on the loan, but you have other properties that you own, so you're paying off those too. Now remember before we talked about this appreciation thing where you're starting to earn a pretty significant portion of your income from this appreciation. The same thing is happening with debt paydown. So it's in addition. And in my mind, appreciation is sort of speculative, as we talked about during the appreciation class. So if the market doesn't go up, you don't get it. If the market goes down, you kind of lose it. But what happens with this one, as long as you make the mortgage payment, it's as close to a guaranteed return as you're going to get. Because if you make your normal mortgage payment, you are getting this. It doesn't matter if the market goes up or down. It's kind of a crazy one. So it's a really, really good thing to think about. This is forced savings because you are putting that.
Well, doesn't it? It does. But why wouldn't it matter? Since you're paying a percentage of your loan.
Yeah, as long as you make that mortgage payment, you are getting debt pay down. It doesn't matter if rents go up. It doesn't matter if the market goes up or down. You're getting this return.
Yeah. So, but what if the markets did go down? So say that. Just think of that as a percentage. You're paying whatever percentage a month. So you're paying. What if the markets do go down? You own less. You own the same percentage of a lower value house. So wouldn't it matter?
No, because you're already counting that in appreciation. So if the market goes down, you just didn't get appreciation or you had negative appreciation that year. So that part of it goes up and down. But this like debt pay down, how much you owe against the property is automatically going down as long as you're making those monthly payments and it's amortizing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions on debt pay down? Cash flow. So we talked about this before. In year one, why don't we have cash flow? Why do I start year two?
Financing that down payment essentially.
Well, why don't we have cash flow in year one?
Oh, because it's, yeah, not a rent.
Because we are living in the property. You're nomading the property. You're moving in. So there's no cash flow in year one at all. We got appreciation in year one, right? We're living in the property. The properties go up in value when we live in them? Yeah, so you get that one. Do we pay down loans on properties when we live in them? Yeah, so you get those two in year one. In year one, though, we don't get cash flow. So basically in year two, when we first go start the property, you have negative $948 a month in cash flow. No, I'm sorry, not per month, per year in cash flow. Okay? Why don't we have positive cash flow in this property?
Not renting it for high enough because you're paying that higher mortgage than the rent.
You're not renting for high enough, and you only put 5% down. So if you had put more than 5% down in this particular property, if you had put 20% down, I have a feeling it's positive cash flow. Because that's really one of our criteria for selecting properties. We analyze it as if we put 20% down and we want to see, we want to be in the top 10% of cash flowing properties. That's one of our selection criteria. So if we're only doing this one and we're putting 5% down, this is negative $948 a year. Okay? If you were going to put, in order to do this property, you had to put 5% down. Let's use really rough numbers. So it's about a $300,000 property. If you put 5% down on it, you had to put down about 15 grand. Okay? If you had put down 20%, how much would you have put down? 60 grand. So basically we saved or didn't have to put down $45,000. So Eddie, if I said to you, listen, this is what I'm going to do for you. You can either give me $45,000 and I'll give you some positive cash flow, or you don't have to come up with 45 grand, but you're going to pay me $948 the first year instead. And the next year, you're going to pay me you're going to pay me $480. And then by the next year, you're going to be about break even. So you can either pay me about, I don't know, $1,500 over 2 years, or you can pay me $45,000 up front. Which would you prefer?
Option two.
Yeah, and I think most people would take that. So basically you're saying I'm going to finance my down payment over time because I'm not going to put down 60 grand. I'm only going to put down 15. Instead, I'm going to have negative cash flow. And that's the way that I think about it. Now, do we really have negative cash flow here?
I'm not.
No, I mean, I don't think we do. One of the reasons why is depreciation. So here's the depreciation slide. Depreciation is when you have a rental property, the government allows you to deduct part of the value of the property itself, not the value of the land, and say it's going to decrease in value over time. But basically, it's going to depreciate away. The asset itself is going to decay. You're going to need to repair it and replace it and do things like that. And so over 27 and a half years, you get to depreciate the value of the home. So on this particular house, we're saying $8,840 is depreciated in year one. Okay? If you actually, so how does depreciation work? Does anyone know? You know how it works?
Taxes, yeah.
Yeah, so let's say you made $100,000 a year, and you have $8,840 in depreciation. What do you end up paying tax on?
91, whatever.
Yeah, so basically this reduces your income, so now instead of paying taxes on 100, you're paying taxes on 91 and change. So you now have to pay less tax on this. So really, you're not saving this amount of money. You're saving this amount of money times whatever your tax rate is, okay? Which is this amount. So we assumed a tax rate of 20%. What's up with 20%?
I wish I had 20%. That'd be nice.
You wish you had a 20% tax rate?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to look at that because we're going to actually show some tax rate stuff tonight. You may be surprised. So 20% is the effective tax rate. It's not the top tax rate that you're paying. It's the overall tax rate you have on your entire income. So 20% tax rate, you now get $1,768. And this is based on earning enough money to do the Nomad model. So really, you saved $1,768 on your taxes. You could decide, I'm going to make adjustments in whatever that form is that allows you to pay less in tax monthly or whatever your pay period is, and collect this monthly, like $150 or so a month on your paycheck. So really, it's cash flow, right? You're saving at the end of the year. You can either get it as a big chunk or get it monthly by adjusting your numbers on your tax return, on your tax slip for your job. Okay? So if you combine the $1,768 you're getting from this cash flow and the negative $950 or whatever it was, we're positive. So you really don't even have negative cash flow. You have negative cash flow when you just do your expenses, but you don't have it when you count depreciation. Okay? Now I skipped some stuff. Let me go back. So we talked about cash flow. This idea of renting bedrooms. So most college students have roommates. It's kind of a relatively unusual perk in order to be able to live by yourself in your own house as a college student, right? Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
You guys all have roommates? Okay. So if you were going to continue, say, listen, I'm already used to living with roommates. What if I just continued that after I got out of college? I sucked it up and did it for another 10 years or so. What would happen? Well, if you went and you got a 3-bedroom house that you did Nomad with, you moved into one, and you said, I'm going to get roommates for the other 2. What do you think in Fort Collins? What's the going rate for roommates?
550.
Yeah, I think 500 to 550 is pretty easy in our marketplace. Okay, so 500 per bedroom that you rent. Many people will add utilities to this, but you can decide if you want to do that. So you buy a 3-bedroom house, you rent 2 bedrooms out, you end up saving $1,000 per month toward down payment. So how much did we need to do the down payment on the $300,000 property, approximately? $15K. So if you went into your first house, you got 2 roommates, your roommates were each paying you $500 a month, you now have $1,000 coming in per month. Over the course of a year, you now save $12,000. That's pretty close to the $15,000 you're going to need to do down payment. So basically, by having roommates, you get your whole down payment. Pretty close. Okay? If you buy a 4-bedroom, you rent 3 bedrooms, you save $1,500 per month toward down payment, or essentially eliminate the mortgage payment where you live, you have your choice. You can think about it as either I get $18,500 times 3 times 12, right? You can get $18,000 for down payment, or the most of the mortgage payment that you're paying to live there can be taken care of by your roommates, and then you can decide to save your down payment from your paycheck. Does that make sense? So it's 2 ways of looking at it. It's not both, it's one or the other. You're not going to be able to double dip. Okay? So those are kind of some strategies. You essentially eliminate that. Be aware of occupancy limits. So in Fort Collins, we have a rule called U+2. You guys all aware of this? Okay, so you basically are not allowed to have more than 3 unrelated people living in a house. Okay?
Weird because you have like 4-person apartments. I'm in a 4-person.
Agreed. That's the argument, right, that everyone makes. There are 4-bedroom places in town. Why can't I rent out 4 bedrooms? And that's what they argue. But the city has an ordinance that says you have to do U+2. Okay? So if you want to abide by the rules, and there's some pretty strict, stiff penalties if you don't abide by them, so you should. Fort Collins has 3 unrelated, aka U+2. Windsor has a similar law. Okay? I heard a rumor that Greeley does, but they don't enforce it. So I don't know for sure. I've never seen it enforced, but I know that Fort Collins does, and I know that Windsor does. So if you're in those 2 cities, you got to be careful about these occupancy limits. Okay? All right. We covered depreciation, and we covered cash flow from depreciation, and we talked about the 20%. This is going to be a summary of the cash flow we had, that's the green one, and then that depreciation benefit, the cash flow from depreciation, 1768. If you add these 2 together, it's going to show you the orange one. So really what I did is I just summed these together and showed you what the orange one is for each year. This is one house. So the first house in year 2, $820 in net positive cash flow when you take into account the negative cash flow and the depreciation benefit. Okay? So you got this, 1288, 1769, and then by year 10, you've got almost $5,000 in cash flow between depreciation and true positive cash flow per house. Okay? And realize these are kind of staggered. I'll show you another chart later on where we kind of add them up, but this is going to happen in year 3 for your second house. It'll happen in year 4 for your third house, and so on. They kind of all get skewed off by 1 because you're delaying them. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions on this?
I kind of forgot, I guess. So wait, why are we so negative initially? I know we're not renting it out, but why is there such a drastic change between 2 and 4 in terms of actual physical cash flow?
So 948 to 480 to 1.
Yeah.
Why is it getting better?
Well, I know why it's getting better, but it seems very drastic. So.
Per year.
This is a per year number. So basically you're saying we're decreasing the amount of negative cash flow by about $500.
And that's only due to increased rents and also less you pay?
It's primarily actually increased rents.
Increased rents?
Yeah, because if you think about this, let's say you're getting, I think the rent we used to model this is $1,825. What's 3% of $1,825? It's like $50, right? It's pretty close. So it's about $50, and that's the difference. So $50 times 12 is $600 a year.
Okay, so you have to be pretty vigilant on
On raising rents, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And slow and steady. We're not trying to gouge anybody, but a normal kind of inflation type of thing with rents, that's normal and expected. Yeah. Okay? So we're seeing a kind of increase. Any other questions on total cash flow with depreciation?
So just a question that I
Yeah.
actually haven't thought about ever in these classes is the write-off. You talk about depreciation, which is pretty much a write-off.
Yes.
So what about write-off for like the interest you pay on your mortgage?
I don't model
that
it.
at all?
I don't model it at all, but you do have a benefit of doing that. Yeah.
And so now, when you're talking about roommates, this is something I'm actually going to deal with this year on taxes. I can write off part of my depreciation, or part depreciation, and then part of the.
Yeah.
How does this balance?
That's my understanding too. You should check with your CPA, but my understanding is that if you say, half of my house is considered rental property, then you can actually take half of the depreciation benefit and you could take half of the interest deduction. It's my understanding. But check with your CPA because I'm not a tax guy. And I have my stuff done by someone else. I don't do it myself.
3 bedrooms and I rent out 1 or 2 or whatever.
One could argue it's by bedroom. I would check with what's normal for your CPA to do that. Some people, I've heard people say it's square footage, and I've heard,
Footage of bedrooms? I like that.
I don't know, because they're using the kitchen too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so it's this weird thing. I would ask them what is normal when you do it on your tax returns, because you don't want to get audited. You want to actually do stuff that's correct. And you don't have to do it. What I'm trying to point out is, if you get this, even with the roommates, it's a super bonus for year one, because we don't otherwise take it into account. I mean, it's not even modeled.
Yeah.
We're assuming you skip it. So if you get it, that's even better. So I think that's the kind of thing to consider there. But check your CPA to make sure.
So just like $948, but I mean, like, you could say that's balanced off by that house you're living in now in year 2 in your new house by the write-off just from the mortgage interest, right?
I think you could probably offset a good part of that. I don't know if you'll get the full thing, but yeah. Yeah, I check with the CPA just to make sure. Yeah. Any other questions on this? Sweet. All right, so total cash returns. So what I'm going to show now is the sum of appreciation, debt pay down, depreciation, and cash flow. Okay? So in year one, what don't we have? We don't have cash flow and we don't have depreciation unless you're doing roommates. And then in those cases, you probably do have cash flow and probably depreciation. But in year one, you normally have appreciation. That's the blue block. The red block is going to be debt pay down, how much you paid in debt. And so in year one, between the house going up in value and you paying off your loan, you made almost 13 grand on a $44,000 or so salary. That's what we're assuming here. Not bad. Year two, you have negative cash flow. That's the green below the zero line. You have yellow, which is your depreciation benefit. Now notice here, I'm using, as your kind of total cash return, I'm not using the cash flow portion of depreciation. I'm saying what's the benefit that you can use to offset income? Okay? So this is deceptively large. It's not really this whole thing if you're just doing cash benefit. Because
Or 20%.
yeah, the rule of thumb I use is 3% of the value of the house is what you tend to get, is the kind of rule. All right, so basically this shows you depreciation, this shows you the debt pay down, and this shows you the appreciation. So it's about $21,000 is your benefit in year two. So you do Nomad year one, you make about 13K. You do Nomad in year two, you make about 21,000 and 12,000 because now you have two houses. So the total benefit, including all of the areas, is almost, squint really hard, 75% of your salary. By the time you get to year three, it's 22, 21, and 12. It's your salary. I mean, you're basically doubling your salary by being in a job for 3 years out of college. It's pretty crazy. That's really what's amazing about this, okay? So you just see this all for one property, realize by the time you get to year 10, you've got a $30,000 almost a year, times 10, you're doing like 300 grand a year in benefit between appreciation, depreciation, debt pay down, and cash flow. It's crazy.
And not to mention all this, like, all that has allowed you to do, if you smart with the reinvesting it as well.
Yeah. Well, we're not. Some of this stuff you can't reinvest, right?
Well, that, yeah. But
Because it's locked in the property. The appreciation, unless you're going to refinance out, it's kind of like a tax deferred, just sitting there type of thing. Your debt pay down, you're not really tapping into that unless you refinance or sell the property. The green bars you're getting, and then you're getting whatever your tax rate is times the yellow bars. That's what you're seeing out of the property. So it's almost like a forced, we're going to have you save this for the future because it's hard to access. It's hard to access appreciation and debt pay down. And some of the stuff we're going to give you now. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
Obviously, the idea is you buy the first house, you live in it. Second year, you're buying another house and you're living in it.
Yes.
Third year, every year you're buying a house.
Totally. So we missed this at the very beginning, but basically I usually cover this at like one of the first slides, and I think you just came in a couple minutes late. So basically what you do is you move into a house, owner-occupant the first year, and you do owner-occupant down payment. So you could do nothing down with USDA or VA, 1% down conventional, 3.5% down for FHA, or what we model is 5% down for conventional. Okay, so when we model this whole thing, we're saying each year you're putting 5% down, you're moving into the property, and as a requirement of the lender, you are living there for a year. That is like what the lender says you have to do in order to be in compliance, in order to get owner-occupant financing. So we're agreeing to the rules. You say we need to live into a year, we're moving in for a year. At the end of the year, we buy another property, we move into that one, and we convert the previous one to a rental.
And how much do you have to usually put down on your second one?
5%. So every additional house thereafter, you can do 5% down on all of them.
And they're doing that right now?
Yes, absolutely.
Where are you finding
The loans?
5%?
Oh, almost all the conventional loan programs have 5% down programs. Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, we're not talking about jumbo. We're really talking about like this kind of second quartile to below median type price housing. So we're staying in the meat of the market. We're not going jumbo. 5% down. That's what's crazy about this whole thing. And in fact, the class we're doing next week, I'm going to show you, it's a lot more work than what I'm talking about here. But we're going to show you a model where you can do the entire, acquire 10 properties. In fact, you can acquire more than 10. The single 1% down payment. $3,000 down on a $300,000 property. And then you use the property you're leaving to provide the down payment for the next one.
What about the debt to income ratios and all that?
That's what that loan, that's what the income we did is. That slide where I showed you how much money you need to make, we're calculating debt to income.
So you can show that as income.
You could show the previous rentals for income. Yep, because you're getting renters.
Before they're even rented, actually.
If you provide a lease.
Lease with security deposit.
Yep.
And
How do you know this? Just did it today.
So the
This stuff works.
cash flow, my first house I didn't even have. I had positive cash flow. My first house that I just moved out of.
Yeah, and I'm showing this model to give you an idea of like, try to be super conservative. I'm showing you negative cash flow because everyone argues, oh, you know, it's going to be really hard to get negative, it's going to be hard to get positive cash flow. No problem. Let me show you how it looks with negative cash flow. Let's go ahead and do this. But you just did one and you've got positive cash flow. And so you,
$50 a month, so.
yeah, and you totally can do this. And he's going to have like border, I hope you don't mind me saying, but he's going to have roommates and he's going to have border income from this one. So his down payment for the next one's covered. It's like great stuff. Okay? Any questions on this? All right. So rental property expenses. I'm going somewhere with this. So this is, in year 2, this is a pie chart of all the expenses you have. I want to tell you that I'm taking into account a bunch of stuff. Number 1, your mortgage payment. This is what percentage of the amount of all of your expenses that the mortgage payment takes up. It's like 3/4, 2/3 to 3/4. You can just see how large it is, right? That's the mortgage payment. Property taxes, this is the blue slide right here. This is how much you're saving in property taxes. And I'll mention something. Let me go back for a second. Mortgage payment. In year 2, your mortgage payment is this. In year 3, does your mortgage payment get bigger or smaller? It's the same. Because your mortgage payment, your principal and interest part of your payment, is the same for a 30-year loan. It's the exact same every year. Okay? What about property taxes? This is the amount of your property taxes in year 2. Does this part of the pie get bigger or smaller? It tends to get bigger because, and in our model, we model it that way. Because what we say is property taxes are a certain percentage of the value of the property. And as the property value goes up, we actually make adjustments to this. So when we're doing our calculations and calculating cash flow and everything, we're assuming property taxes are going up, okay, at the same rate that the house is going up. So we take that into account. What about insurance on the property? Is that going to get bigger or smaller? It's going to get bigger. We're doing the same thing. We're saying insurance is a certain percentage of the value of the property. And so we're taking that into account. We're making it larger over time. In this case, there's no HOA on this particular property, so there's no HOA number. But this maintenance number, what's maintenance? Yeah, we're setting money aside every time rent comes in to say we're going to have repairs on properties. We're not modeling the whole thing and saying there's no repairs. We're not pretending that. We're being conservative. We're saying we're going to set money aside every single month that we have rent coming in. We'll put it in the account, and we're going to have maintenance set aside. So I think you should model that, and we do. And our negative cash flow number already takes into account that we're setting money aside for maintenance. So it's not going to be extra. Okay? And this goes up over time at the same rate because we do this as a percentage of rent. And rents are going up too. Okay? Vacancy. Vacancy goes up too because we're doing it as a percentage of rents. I think we use either 3 or 5%, I forget which now, for vacancy rate. And what do we recommend people do in order to minimize vacancy? Rent it early. How many days early usually? Yeah, 60 at least. I mean, we should really know ahead of time if we can. But 90 to 60 days ahead, before you're about to move out of that property, you need to find a tenant. And that'll help minimize. And then when your tenant's in there, before their lease ends, we're doing it 60 or 90 days ahead of time. We're not waiting till the end and having vacancy. So this vacancy should be conservative, okay, if you're doing it right. Utilities, if you were paying any utilities, if you bought a duplex and there was a common area light or something like that, we would model utilities. In this case, single family home, tenants paying all utilities. So we model 0. Okay? And then property management, we're assuming you're managing it yourself. If you want to go add in property management, there is a field in there. You can go ahead and say, property management is costing me 10%. What does my cash flow look like when you do that? Cash flow gets really ugly if you don't manage it yourself. This is an active investment. It's not passive. It's not like sticking the money in the stock market. Okay? So you just see this expense on here. So the reason why I'm talking about maintenance is I want to talk about just some really basic, what I consider to be financial prudence type of stuff for young professional nomads coming out of college. If you've never heard this before, this may sound new to you. If you've heard it before, it's going to sound like, oh yeah, James, that makes total sense. Okay? So let's talk about that. Oh, let me talk about this first. So basically, I'm showing you how much we're putting aside for maintenance. In year 1, I take this back. This chart is wrong. There is no maintenance in year 1, okay? So ignore this one right here. Maintenance starts in year 2 because we're doing maintenance on rent coming in, okay? So we're saying we're setting aside $2,626 the first year, $27 in the second, and so on for each house, okay? So ignore year 1, that's wrong. Allison, would you do me a favor? Would you email me and tell me to correct this slide because it's not correct. But basically, you can see the amount we're doing in maintenance through those years, okay? Awesome. All right, so this is the financial prudence stuff. So in my opinion, when you're a young nomad, just out of college, you get your first job, these are kind of the steps I think you should take just about general financial stuff. So number 1, if your employer offers some type of financial retirement plan, especially if they're going to give you some type of match, you absolutely maximize that puppy. Okay? If they're going to give you, like if you say, hey, listen, if you put 3% into your retirement account, we'll add another 3%, you just made 100% return on your money. You should absolutely 100%, before you do Nomad, maximize that puppy first. Okay? Once you do that, I think you should still save at least 10% of your income. Why am I telling you, if we're going to do Nomad and things are going to be okay, why am I telling you to save 10% of your income, the regular income?
Good to do just in general.
Yeah, totally. I mean, what happens if, heaven forbid, there's a roof that goes out on your property, and you bought a property that was a little older? I mean, we're modeling the 286 property is brand new construction. I don't know if I ever mentioned that to you, but the one we're modeling is you go buy a brand new house for 286. It's in Windsor. You can buy them today. That's a real house. Okay. But what if you're not buying a brand new house? What if you're buying a house that has a roof that's 20 years old, and now all of a sudden you get a hailstorm and the roof goes, and you got to come up with money in order to do that? It may not be enough in your maintenance account, especially year 1, to do that. So we tell you, save at least 10% of your income. Have cash elsewhere. Put that into either a savings account or a stock market account, wherever you do it. I don't care, but just save money. Live below your means, okay? And then number 3, do the Nomad plan. And we talked about setting aside maintenance reserves from rent as an additional buffer. So you should have some maintenance money set aside. You should have your 10% set aside. And heaven forbid you really, really need to tap into something, you have your retirement plan here from your employer that you can use as additional reserves, okay? But we really want to see you flush. We don't want you doing this and living really, really tight. As soon as you start owning rental property, I think you need to start thinking about having pretty significant buffers, okay? And if you want to know, like, fully fledged out kind of plan for rental property, I think you personally should have 6 months of your entire expenses set aside and saving somewhere. And it could be a combination of all these. I would prefer it if it was from number 2. That's what I think is ideal, at least 6 months to have holding. Just set aside somewhere in cash, okay? All right, any questions about the kind of saving as a young nomad, just really basic stuff? Does that make sense, everybody, while I'm kind of so paranoid about making sure you guys have money? Okay, you should do it. And it's a lot easier when you first come out of college to go from making almost nothing in college to saying, okay, now I only make 90% or 80% of my salary. to going to the full 100%, and then you got to figure out later where you're going to get savings monies from. So, you get out of school, you're like, okay, now I'm making $4,000 a month. No, you're not. Now you're really making $3,200 a month, and just pretend that's all you got paid, and live off of 32. Make sense? Okay. All right, so amount invested each year. So we talk about how much you need in order to do this plan. In year one, you need, we said it was like $15,000. We were using really rough math. It's actually $286,000 property, and we're doing 5% of that. So that's really $14,300 in year one. We don't have any negative cash flow in year one. Why not?
Living there.
Yeah, you're living there. You're not renting the property. Okay? But in year two, you have negative cash flow. That's that 9, whatever it was, plus 14,729. It's a little bit more than last year because it's still 5%, but the property value went up. So you're buying a little bit more expensive property, 3% more. So the total you need in year two is 15,677. If you had gotten a 4-bedroom and rented out 3 of them, you still have enough for your down payment, right? 16,627 in year 3, and it keeps increasing till 24,49. You'll notice though, these negative cash flows really contribute to how much more you need. And then you have negative cash flow in year 11 and year 12. By year 13, you don't have negative cash flow anymore. It goes away. Okay? But this continues on. Any questions about amount invested each year? All right. So a lot of times when I do these presentations, I go into a lot of detail about how much cash flow you get and how much equity you have. That's in all the other presentations. If you want to see those, go watch a different one. But tonight I'm going to cover some additional things. So I summarize it. I'm only going to show you this one. If you had taken that same amount of money that we showed on this slide, added up all of these in this order, including the negative cash flow, and you invested it in the stock market, what do you think you can get as a return in the stock market?
10% on a great day.
Yeah, I think over a very long period of time, if you're able to get 10%, you're crushing it consistently. Okay. Some people can say I can do better than that. Okay, great. Most people say they can't, right? And I think historically it's less than 10%. But if you're saying over 40 years, if you could take all the money you did for down payment and the negative cash flow and you put it in the stock market, you got 10% return, you would have $5.3 million by the end of 40 years.
Okay. Starting in year 1, right?
Year 1, you put whatever year's one's money in. Year 2, you add this amount of money and you got 10% on this. Year 3, you add this money and you got 10% on both of these. So it's doing it right. It's doing the math correctly, compounding. Okay? So if you did that, $5.3 million in 40 years from now. Okay? If you do Nomad, you buy 10 properties over 10 years, you stop buying, you just let them cash flow and you let them pay off. At the end of that time, you have $14 million in cash and equity. So you got cash flow for a portion of it, and you got the equity in the properties at the end. That's 14. So you can see the difference between the stock market at 10% and doing the Nomad is pretty significant. So that's all I'm really going to say. There's a whole bunch of charts and stuff like that in other presentations, and I use the same assumptions for this that I did in the other ones. I'm trying to be consistent to show you the same stuff when we talk about it different ways. Okay? Any questions on that? All right. Here's the less expensive housing challenges. So we're going to talk here in a minute because we're going to see, what if you're not making $45,000 a year, whatever the number is right out of college? What if you're making less? Can we do this? So we're going to look at less expensive housing. What are some of the challenges of doing that? Number one is you might have fewer bedrooms. If you want to buy a less expensive house than $286,000, you may be looking at 2-bedroom houses instead of 3-bedroom. So I would prefer you probably go to an area outside and look at 3-bedroom, but maybe you say, listen, I really, really want 4 columns. And so I can't afford $286,000. What can I get for $250 or $225 or $200 or $175 in 4 columns? And it might be a 2-bedroom. Yeah, not much, right? So it's really, really hard. So we might have fewer bedrooms, limited roommates, which means limited help with down payment. We talked before about this idea, you get a 3-bedroom, you rent out 2 bedrooms, now you got $1,000 a month coming in. That significantly helps get you where you need to be for down payments. You don't have that anymore if you get rid of one of the roommates or one of the rooms. You can only do $500 for that room. Okay? So be careful of that. The cost for an extra bedroom is often relatively small. So we've been talking about this new construction house, the $286,000 property. That particular builder, they have a 3-bedroom model and they have a 4-bedroom model. Do you know what the difference in price between 3 and 4 bedrooms are? About $10,000. Okay? Now, when you think about that, you're like, wow, so I can get an extra $500 a month. I'm going to have to spend $10,000 more. Is that worth it? Well, maybe. The way I think about it is this, though. you're financing the $10,000. So you're really not coming out of pocket 10K. You're really coming out of pocket 5% of 10K as your down payment. So what's 5% of $10,000? Not mistaken, it's $500. Okay, it's hard to do math in front of the room, but basically I think it's $500. So you come up with $500 down, and then your monthly payment on financing $10,000. Anyone remember the rule of thumb? For every 10K we borrow in our current interest rate environment, it's about $50 a month in payment. So you come up with $500 more down, and you pay $50 a month in order to get the first year a roommate that's going to pay $500 a month for that bedroom. Is that a good return on your money? The first month you get the $500 back. The next month you're making $450 profit for 11 more months. Seems like a deal to me. Yeah, it's a great return. Okay? And then once you actually move out and you no longer have roommates, how much can you get for an extra bedroom? What's the difference in rent between a 3-bedroom and a 4-bedroom? I'll tell you, it's not $500 a month. Yeah, I think a reasonable number, really conservative, is $100. I don't think anyone would balk between paying $100 more for a bedroom. Now, you're paying $50 a month to get the extra bedroom. You're getting $100 more in rent. Is it worth paying the extra and getting the extra bedroom? I think in most cases it totally is. Okay? So you can kind of see that example and walk through that. The other thing we're going to see when we look at lower price houses is deferred maintenance. You're going to see stuff that needs work. You're not going to find houses that are in completely perfect condition with brand new roofs and brand new furnaces and brand new flooring. And so you're going to have deferred maintenance. And so you want to be aware of that and look for it. And you might have what I call imminent CapEx expenses, capital expenses where you have a roof due or you have a furnace due and you're looking at a property, you're like, I want to stay below 180, but I'm having a really hard time because the stuff that I'm seeing all has, it needs a new roof or it needs a new furnace or it needs new flooring or the kitchens are really outdated and I'm going to have problems with this. So you got to weigh this, but just realize that you're going to do this. What's one of the solutions to this CapEx problem? Is anyone at the class where we talked about this? What was the solution?
Owner financing. Or not owner financing, sorry.
The lease option exits. Yeah, so instead of actually staying in the property for the 5 years when we know we're going to need a new roof, we do a lease option and get out of the property sooner than that. And so one of the strategies to constantly turn inventory is to get rid of CapEx is doing lease option exits. And go watch the lease option exit class. We talk about that in detail. Okay? Any questions about kind of like these less expensive housing challenges? Because we're going to go talk about an example. And the example is actually really compelling. So it sort of answers your question, Cameron, about do you do more expensive properties if you could do them, or do you do less expensive properties? It makes a really good case here in a second about doing the less expensive ones. Okay? Any questions? All right. So this is that same chart we did before. I'm just going to emphasize this is the 25th percentile. This means that people earn 3/4 of the people earn more than this, and 1/4 of the people earn less than this. And I'm going to kind of focus right now on the lowest one, which is the English major, where they make $24K a year. So you come out of college and you're like, I only make $24K a year, James. You're talking about earning $44,000 a year. It's going to be hard to do. If you're married, when we talk about other classes, if you've got 2 spouses, 2 of them making $24,000 a year, you got it. Between the 2 of you, you could totally do the $286,000 plan. You're a new young professional nomad coming out of college, you might not be able to swing the whole thing yourself. Okay? So let's take a look at this. $24,000 a year. Let's kind of target that. So what I did is I said, okay, we got about $24,000 a year. Let's go find out what the least expensive city to buy housing is in our northern Colorado market. And so I pulled up a price chart showing this year, basically January through September, each month, and it shows you the band. This is the 80th percentile of housing in Fort Collins. This is the 20th percentile, which means 1 out of 5 houses are cheaper than this that's sold in Fort Collins in that month, and 1 in 5 are more expensive than this. This hard line in the middle shows you the median. The median says that half of the transactions were above this and half were below. And I also have bands for 30 to 70th percentile and 40 to 60, but I'm going to really focus on this bottom edge here and see what the cheapest properties people could buy, the cheapest 20% of properties, or cheapest 1/5 of properties in Fort Collins.
Are these 3 twos or what?
This is all properties right now. I'm going to show you another chart that breaks down the bedrooms. Okay? At least I think I have it in here. And if I don't, I did the research on it to make sure. Single family homes. Single family homes, yep. And it includes single family and attached dwellings. So it's a combination of everything. Yep. Okay, so right here, you can see this number is kind of varied from, I don't know, 260 or so. It went up a little bit in May to maybe 270, but by the time we're at September, and that's the number I use, it's about 260. So 1 in 5 properties sold for less than 260 in Fort Collins. Our number that we were using before was what, 286? That doesn't really help us that much. Yeah, it's 10% cheaper, but it's not really going to give us a lot of ground, right? So Fort Collins is probably out. So if you're a new graduate and you're kind of on that 24,000, you might not be living in Fort Collins, right? There's this kind of perception out there that young kids graduate from college and they want to have the same lifestyle or better that their parents had. It took your parents a long time to get to where they are. So to think that you can have the lifestyle that your parents had, it may not happen right away. You may be able to exceed it if you do the Nomad model, but you may be buying a less expensive house to start with, okay? Which may not be Fort Collins. Same chart, Loveland. So Loveland starts, I don't know, whatever this is, 220 over here in January. By the time we get to September, though, it's 259. Fort Collins was 260. Loveland's 259. That really doesn't help us either. We were looking at $286,000 properties. Not much help. Windsor. This is where the property was, by the way, that we looked at. So the property that was 286, we're saying over here in September, 275 is the 20th percentile. So we're already right at the edge for that particular property.
What's happening in Windsor last year? Why was it dropping down?
Yeah, just a little bit of price suppression. Probably a whole bunch of low-price new construction. Probably just pushed the price down. But, I mean, Windsor's also a relatively small city, so the data can be moved pretty easily. Okay. So basically we're seeing, though, Windsor's 275. We've been looking at 286, and the property I'm talking about is in Windsor. Okay? But if you're looking at these and you're saying that, it doesn't really help to look at Windsor. However, we'll look at Greeley. So Greeley, I don't know, 160, maybe a high of 200 back in May, but right here in September, 178. Wow, does that change things? $178,000 property in Greeley. That means that 1 out of 5 properties sold for less than 178 in Greeley. I can work with that. 20th percentile price summary shows you 260, 259, 275 in Windsor. We were using the 286 property in Windsor. Greeley's 178. Let's take a look at this. Rent, $13.95 per month. So, I forget, did I show the rent chart? I didn't do that. So I have a rent chart. It's on the blog. So the website address at the very beginning of this presentation. I actually showed some additional slides that I didn't put in here. One of the things I showed was what the average and the median rent was in Greeley for 3-bedroom houses. The average, I think, was $14.23, and the median was $14.95 for a 3-bedroom house in Greeley. So what I decided to use, what's that?
What is it in Fort Collins?
I'd have to go look. I don't remember. I did the slide for Greeley, but I have the data for that.
Like 17 something, yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if it's 1,800-ish. Yeah. So basically, the rent for Greeley, though, $13.95. I told you the average was $14.23 and the median was $14.95. Is $13.95 pretty conservative? Yeah, I think so too. So the actual average, $14.43. Oh, look, it had numbers up here. $14.43 and $14.95 for the median. And I think I did a chart on here for doing the analysis. So I'm going to plug in the number $13.95 and $178 for purchase price with the same assumptions I did before. Okay? 3% appreciation, all that stuff. Now, instead of earning $3,700 a month, you can do this deal. You can do the $178,000 property with $2,316 a month. Pretty good, right? You don't need to earn nearly that $44,000 or whatever it was. What else is interesting about this chart? If you remember before, this was increasing over time. It was going up. You needed to earn more money every year in order to buy the next house. What happens here? It's going down. We don't need to earn as much money in order to buy the next property. Why?
Better cash flow.
Positive cash flow. So the cash flow from the properties we previously bought are now helping us buy the next property. This is the benefit of positive cash flow when you buy your deals. So in a theory, in practice, it's better to buy houses with better positive cash flow whenever you can. Does the model work if you can't do it? Totally. And we model it that way. But if you can, it's better to buy it with positive cash flow. This is now the yearly salary. Same slide, just yearly. $27,792. What was the number for the teacher? It was like $24,000? So this is much closer, pretty doable for a lot of people, right? And that was the lowest of the kind of like career choices, the kind of graduate degrees you can get, was the English one, and that was $24,000. So now all of a sudden we're able to do it with $27,782, and you could do it with less over time. How can we overcome this need for $27,792? Let's say you really only make $24,000, but you really do want to buy the 100 property. What's one way to overcome it? You can make more money or more down. You can actually put more down so that you're financing less and still qualify. So if you have a bigger down payment, you can do this too. Okay? All right. Any questions on this? We're going down. You see this. In fact, year 10, you qualify based on housing income alone. You don't even need a job. Kind of crazy. All right, so estimate your tax rate. So remember you asked before, kind of tax rate thing? So I went and I ran numbers, and the tax rate number from before, the 20%, was based on, I think, you earning $44,000, $47,000 a year. So your tax rate was 20%. If you only earn $28,000, you're single, and this is from tax rate website. Just go look for effective income tax. It does a calculator. But basically, your tax on this as a percentage of your income is 13.35. So your effective tax rate is 13.35 on this. So total cash flow with depreciation on one home over 10 years. So your depreciation in year 2, first year you're renting it, is $734. That's less than the $1,400 we were talking about before. Cheaper house and lower tax rate. Okay? The amount of cash flow you have, though, is $2,145. You're making almost $200 a month in positive cash flow when you first rent it. Buying a $178,000 property, putting 5% down, paying PMI, and actually having a $1,395 per month payment on it. You're making almost $200 a month cash flow. So your total cash flow in year 2 is $2,879. Almost 32, goes up. So basically, by the time you're in year 10, you're making almost $6,000 a year in cash flow and tax benefits on one property. How much were you earning? Like $27,000. That's huge. You basically gave yourself a 25% raise just by having the property by the time you get to year 10. And remember, you have multiples of these properties because you're buying more than one. It's crazy stuff. Which brings me to this slide on effective retirement. Effective retirement, in my opinion, is when passive income meets or exceeds your active or job income. So once you have enough passive income coming in, the property cash flows, and you're getting depreciation benefit, that you don't need your income anymore, you have enough to replace it completely, you can effectively retire. So if you're making less money, you have a lower target to hit. We don't need to come up with $47,000 a year in cash flow for someone that only needs to make $24,000. So what's great about it is if you can keep your expenses down and live on that $24,000 as if you were able to support yourself on that, that's great because your effective retirement number goes way down. When you do hit it, about $28,000 per year in cash flow. When do you do that? What year? Have a guess? You're buying a $178,000 rental property. You're renting them for $1,395 in Greeley. How many years does it take you in order to make about $28,000 per year in positive cash flow?
6 or 7.
Here you go. Year 9. Okay? So this is the sum of all your cash flows. In year 2, you have a little bit. Year 3, it's bigger. Year 4, you have 77. Year 5, you have 11,000, 15,000, 19,000, 25,000. By the time you get to year 9, before you bought your last property, you are effectively retired. You're making more from your income, more income from your passive investments than you are from your job. Craziness. Isn't that pretty amazing? So I also show you what happens from year 10 to year 20. So by the time you get to 10 properties, you're making $37,000. 15 years in, let's see, if you're 22 when you get out of college, 15 years later, you're what, 37? So by the time you're 37, you could be retired with $64,000 a year in passive cash flow, not do anything else. You're done. You can go vacation, do whatever you want to do. That's the plan.
Well, you still have to manage, I guess. Properties kind of.
I think you could probably afford a manager out of that,
Turn it over at that point.
right? I mean, at that point, you just pay a manager. Or you do lease option tenant buyers and you have stuff done. If you need to hire someone at will to do certain things, you do that. So I think it's pretty impressive. So the amount you invested each year. So 5% down on the $178,000 property is $8,900. A little bit more for the next year, a little bit more, a little bit more. You'll notice, though, we have no negative cash flow, so it's not increasing. So this is the amount you need. By the time you need something in year 10, $11,612. If you did your 3-bedroom house and you rented the 2 bedrooms and you got $500 per bedroom, that's $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. That covers your down payment through year 12,
And that's
through year 10.
not even increasing rents or anything like that.
No, it's basically just saying, hey, listen, if I can consistently get $500 per bedroom for my roommates, take my roommates with me every time I move. You don't have to find new roommates. Just say, hey, listen, we're moving. We're getting a new house. Let's go.
And hopefully the house is a little nicer every time. Isn't it?
Well, in this particular model, it's not. It's the same house. It's 3% more per year, which is just depreciation. It's the same house. But you could say, listen, we're going to go get a new house each year and do that. But if you just do this model, you have enough from roommate income to cover your entire down payment. So you're making $28,000 a year. You don't really have to come up with these down payments once you get the first one. And we could do the first one with 1% down. We can do the first one with 0% down if you do VA or USDA. But if you can't do that, you can do 1% down conventional. And then you could just have your roommate and get your roommate money for the next one. Roommate money, roommate money, roommate money.
So you make the argument for the lower, the not as expensive houses.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I'm hoping I'm not going to want to retire at 37.
Yeah.
In terms of like return on equity and I guess wealth generation.
Yes.
Would you say
It's better the other way.
it's
Because,
better?
yeah, think about it this way. So let's say you do $178,000 properties. You buy 10 over 10 years, and at the time, when all of them are paid off in year 40, because it takes till year 40 for the number 10 to be paid off. At the end of year 40, how much do you have in today's dollars in equity? It's really easy to think about, because what you basically say is, I have 10 $178,000 properties that are now free and clear. So in today's dollars, I have 178,000 times 10, which is what, 1.7 million? So you have $1.7 million. You do it the other way. Now you have $286,000 properties that are all paid off after 40 years. In today's dollars, you now have $2.86 million in equity.
So you would recommend, if you're looking at long-term wealth generation and just building equity, try to maximize whatever.
There's a
you can
sweet
afford.
spot.
There's a sweet spot, okay.
Yeah, because what happens is once you get over a certain price, like let's say you're like, hey, listen, I really have the money. I can go do $600,000 properties. The challenge in our marketplace is a $600,000 property does not produce the same amount of rent, kind of comparatively, to a $250,000 or $300,000 property.
40, 50%
Uh,
or the lower, like, slightly
Yeah, it's that second quartile is what I call it. It's not the lowest, the cheapest properties you can find, and it's not above median, although slightly above median is okay. But as soon as you get really high above median, you don't want to do those. You don't want to do the top half of the market. Those are the really expensive things. The best ratio of price to rent historically has been that second quartile.
So sometimes it could be beneficial to live in a maybe more expensive city if you're still.
Well, you end up better at the end, right? Because you end up with, almost $3 million worth of net worth in today's dollars instead of 1.78.
Well, in terms of like the averages are going up. So say if I went to Boulder, it's the median's not going to be 300,000. It'll be probably higher.
But the rents,
Not gonna get the money back.
the rents,
Crazy negative cash flow.
yeah,
That's the issue.
and that's the challenge. And if you can support the negative cash flow, some people will probably tell you that's okay. I would tell you I'm a little bit more conservative. I would prefer you not be negative, including depreciation. Okay. I would prefer that the way I think about the properties, and we talk about this when we analyze deals, is pretend you're putting 20% down and run your cash-on-cash return numbers. And you want to be in the top 10% of the best cash-on-cash return numbers for your properties. And then go ahead and just drop your number from 20% to whatever you're doing, 5% or 1%, and put your PMI in there. And whatever those numbers are, that's what it is. But you're trying to maximize cash flow as if you put 20% down in, even though you're not. So you run the numbers as if you're going to invest in it normally, because you're looking for investment-grade properties. So you got to pretend in year 2, this is going to be a rental. And I know I'm going to finance my down payment, but let's pretend for a second that I'm putting 20% down and I'm looking for the best cash-on-cash return I can get, at least the top 10%, top 1 out of 10 properties that you're doing. And then you make considerations based on where I want to live, the type of property I want, deferred maintenance kind of limited, and you kind of take into account those other factors, still maximizing cash flow. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
So that's how I look at it. Yeah.
Do you find it better in college towns? It really is a college town versus Windsor.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue that college towns have some advantages. They have historically some better stability at least. I like Windsor. I like Fort Collins. If I had to like order my cities in preference, I would probably say it is Fort Collins, Loveland, Windsor, and then Greeley. Just my personal preference of where I'd want to hold rental properties. But if you've only got 24,000, or you really want to do this positive cash flow, the negative cash flow scares you for some reason, Greeley is totally acceptable. I'm fine with it. But if there's a lot of people that they've got, it could be a little snobbishness, but I think it's actually grounded in real numbers. Fort Collins is kind of a blue chip stock, and if you're going to invest somewhere, I'd be willing to pay a premium to live in Fort Collins and get slightly less return on my money in some cases to do that. So
So he's talking like Boulder, well, see, I'm down in Boulder, so,
yeah.
the median price in Louisville alone is 700,000.
Yeah, and you can't rent it for anywhere near the ratios we're seeing, right? You can't rent that for, $4,000 a month or something like that, right?
You're written about 3.
Yeah, and that doesn't work. Those numbers are really ugly. So that's the hard part. Now, if you're in Boulder and that's all you got to work with, we adapt. And so what are ways to adapt? We did a whole presentation on how to increase income on properties, and one of my favorite ways to do that is do lease option exits. So I can overcome the negative cash flow, but we're turning properties, we're getting a big option fee up front, we're charging more like what a monthly payment would be because we're telling them they're buying the property, they're not just renting. So we can overcome that. We work with what we have. In our local market, we don't have to do that. We can make it work with straight rentals. And the numbers aren't nearly as good like the Windsor numbers. There's negative cash flow the first 3 years or 2 years, whatever it is. But Greeley, you can like home run it.
What are the historical appreciation rates in Greeley?
I'd have to go look, but we have some charts on that. If I had to guess, it's probably less than Fort Collins and Loveland. Fort Collins is historically about 4%, Loveland's about 3%. So if I had to guess for Greeley, over a long period of time, probably 2%. Greeley got hit really, really hard during the downturn. And I think part of it was industry at the time. We didn't have a lot of diverse industry over there. And I think they've actually made some pretty significant ground over there, adding to stuff. And it's been a growth stock. I mean, after the downturn, it's like skyrocketed back up. So right now it looks, there was a period of time when I used to tell people, Greeley scares me. But I've since looked like a fool when I tell people that, if you had bought during this downturn, it looks amazing. It's doing really, really well right now. But over a long period of time, real estate's very forgiving. So you might have these big downturns, but if you're holding out, yeah, I think it's fine.
So you mentioned Fort Collins kind of being in that sweet spot. Is that nationwide, or so you say Boulder is more expensive? Is there like
I will tell you,
house
Fort Collins is not in a sweet spot. It's kind of a blue chip stock. It's like a really desirable area, and the numbers are good enough that it works. It's not a great cash flow type of return. We're not typically seeing amazing cash flow numbers on Fort Collins stuff. We see a lot better numbers in Greeley.
But you break even, and you also get, even if it was 4%, you get much higher return in terms of equity.
Yeah, I think it's more of an equity appreciation play than it is a cash flow play.
Okay, and Fort Collins is probably nicer to live in.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? You're making trade-offs because Nomad is not just investments, right? If you were going to go invest your money, you might be able to argue, I'm going to live in Fort Collins and I'm going to get my rentals in Greeley because my cash flow is going to be better in Greeley. And you could make a really good argument about, I'm going to get better cash flow there, so maybe I should invest there. You got to live in these properties. And so you might say to yourself, not going to get as good a cash flow, I'm going to buy in Fort Collins, but I know what I'm doing. I'm deliberately making this choice. It's not a mistake. It's like I've thought it through. I've decided consciously to make the trade of I'm going to get a little worse cash flow here. I'm going to get the depreciation benefit. I'm going to get the tax benefits. And as long as I'm close to break even, I feel really good about it. So that's kind of the thought. But the real rule is, if you say, I want to buy in Fort Collins, you run numbers as if you put 20% down, and you're looking for the top 10% of those cash flow numbers. So you're trying to get the best rental properties you can, and then you're not putting 20% down. But we're running it at 20% down because that's sort of like the normalization when you're doing your calculations. You want to compare, if I were going to put 20% down, what would this look like? And then you're not going to put 20% down. In most cases, you're going to put the 5 or 1 or whatever you're going to do. Okay? Any questions? I think this is pretty close. That's it. Q&A. Any questions on this? You'll notice the classes are really short when Broncos play on Thursday nights. There's definitely a strong correlation between number of slides and whether or not the Broncos are playing. So, any?
Here by duplexes, I'm just thinking the same model through. Are you coming out much more ahead or triplexes?
So let's talk about that. So let's say you wanted to do multifamily. The challenge is getting conventional financing with multifamily, you cannot do it with the 5% down program. However, there are 2 loan programs that you can do the multifamily duplexes, triplexes, up to 4plexes with. And we usually recommend, if you can make the numbers work, and it's really hard to do around here, but if you can make the numbers work, really would work, you do those loans for your first deal or maybe 2. So the 2 loans that you can do multifamily with are VA. So if you have veteran benefits, you can do duplexes, triplexes, and 4plexes with that with nothing down. So for your first property, you can go get a VA loan, put nothing down, move into the property. Then your next one, you're going to do a single family home. The other one is FHA. FHA, 3.5% down, you can do duplexes, triplexes, and 4plexes with. You can only have one FHA loan. There are some really weird exceptions, like if you inherit a property or you move more than 100 miles away. But for the most part, it's a single loan for FHA, and you can do duplexes, triplexes, 4plexes. So a lot of people who don't have VA benefits, they try to do a duplex, triplex, or 4plex with their FHA loan first, and then they do their single family homes. If you have if you have VA benefits, veteran benefits, and you have the ability to get FHA loan, you can do 2. So you do your VA first, you buy a duplex. You do your FHA second, you buy a duplex. And then if you have enough VA benefits left over, you could actually do a third. So you could do 2 VA up front and then a third FHA, but it's really, really uncommon. If you can do one like multifamily to start with, we recommend that because it'll actually improve your cash flow, which will help you qualify for all the other properties. And you really should do it first because the underwriter is going to give you a hard time if you go from a single family home and you say, I want to voluntarily move into a duplex. They're going to be like, I don't think so. There's something wrong with that. And so if you do the duplex first, and then you say, now we're moving up into a single family home, the underwriter, I think, will have a much easier time believing that.
Why do they have to believe it?
Because they think that you're going to commit loan fraud and not move in. They think that you're going to actually go sign paperwork and say, I intend to move in for a year and I'm going to live here for a year, and then you just don't move in afterward.
Okay, so they are pretty stringent about that.
Yeah, they really want to know why you're doing it. So
If you explain to them now.
I'm trying to get enough momentum behind Nomad nationwide that they just say, or you say to them, I'm doing Nomad. And they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. And now I understand why you're moving so many times. But I haven't quite got there yet. Yeah. But it helps if you have a lender that actually understands what you're doing and they're not scratching their head being like, you just bought a house last year. Are you sure you want to do this one? You're going to do owner occupant again? If the lender's been coming to class and they get it and they know the math, like we've got a couple lenders that we work with that do that, it's a lot easier because they're able to go to bat for you and figure stuff out and kind of push. Yeah.
Do you guys have a financing class? Or?
Yeah, we do. We have Financing 101, which goes over all the loan types. We probably have some other ones too, but I think that's the one that comes to mind. Interest rate scenarios is also kind of some financing stuff in there too. And there was one where we did the fixer-upper Nomad, where we talked about buying properties that need work. And there was some financing parts to that because the loans are a little bit different when you're going to do, like 203Ks and fixer-upper type loans. So there's a couple in there. But there's Financing 101 Nomad class on the website if you go there.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thanks for coming, guys. Go Broncos, and I will see you soon.